Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving, purpose-minded women who've written nonfiction books and want to amplify their message beyond the book. I'm a college professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to use their books to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and purpose. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and listening to the podcast. I really appreciate you. I say it all the time. I'll say it again and again and again. You can be doing anything with your time and you take the time out to listen to the podcast. So I really appreciate that. And because you're doing that, you helped us rank in the top 10% of all podcasts according to Listen Notes. So thank you for doing that. And to continue your support, if you go ahead, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast, we greatly appreciate that. Now, I'm very excited about today's guest. Today, I'm talking with Dr. Nika White. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. White. She is an award-winning management and leadership consultant. She's a keynote speaker and published author of the book. This is her latest, Inclusion Uncomplicated. Already, I want to hear more about it, but okay. Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI, published by Forbes Books. And she is, as I mentioned before, she presents keynote speeches, but she does it nationwide and gives presentations on team engagement through belonging, organizational leadership, strategic diversity, and so much more. She brings passion and vision and authentic style to her work. And so I want to welcome today Dr. Nika White. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Robin. I feel very much welcomed, and I'm honored that you have invited me to share with your podcast community.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so let's jump right in. I gave a little bit of your bio. Why don't you start with just telling us more about who you are, and then tell us about your work.
Oh, sure. So I am actually based in Greenville, South Carolina, and I am a DEI practitioner. I'm the founder and lead principal consultant for a boutique consultancy where we intersect the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging with leadership and business. And we work with all types of clients, different industries, different sectors, helping those clients to integrate into their business framework, strategic diversity, intentional inclusion, and a lens of equity. My practice overall is in the space of organizational wellness and development, but I often like to show up by centering DEIB into that body of work. Outside of what I do from a profession standpoint, I am a wife of 26 years. I am a mom of 2 young adults. And I am deeply committed to this work, and I believe in leaving no one behind.
Wow. And congratulations on, did you say 26 years?
Married 26 years, yes. And we have a daughter that will be 23 in July, and a son who is 21. They're just 15 months apart. So my daughter's her first year in grad school, and she's at London School of Economics. So she's across the pond. And my son is he's going now to his senior year of college. And so, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. And the people who are listening can't see you, but I would say you were 26. So it was a surprise.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I will accept it. Thank you so much. But Robin, I'd like to share a bit more than just, the work that I do from my practice perspective, because I feel like so often when we identify ourselves, it's all about our work. And as holistic beings, there's so much more to us. My life is shaped by my family experiences, the work that I do in the communities. And so I often like to make sure that I round out a question of tell us about you by making sure I include a couple different factors. So thank you for that opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. And often I say when I talk about that, I say one of my greatest achievements is that I have convinced my nieces and nephews that I'm the cool aunt.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I
And
know.
it's true. It brings me great joy. I mean, all the
Oh,
professional achievements, but that brings me great joy.
I love that.
So I certainly understand that. Okay. So now you were talking about how you work with all these different organizations. And for people who might not know how it works, do you do training or what's an example of the type of work you do? Kind of in a
That's a great question, Robin. And so we are a full service DEIB consultancy. So for us, we do provide a myriad of service offerings under the broad umbrella of consulting from a DEIB perspective. That could be DEI strategic frameworks for very specific initiatives like formation of business resource groups or employee resource groups. Affinity groups is often some people refer to as affinity groups. But we also do a lot of instructional design of these DEIB learning and development experiences. And I use the word experiences very deliberately because part of how we like to show up to this work is believing that it requires being very strategic to develop a strategy, a learning strategy of multiple experiences, not just, a one singular event where it is structured like a lecture, but really thinking about also the diversity and the way in which people learn and receive information and are able to apply it. And so those learning experiences can look a multitude of ways. It could be small coaching cohorts. It could be more of your keynotes or your workshop type experiences where we are incorporating a lot of micro learning activities for people to be able to apply the information that they're being exposed to. And so those are the two primary buckets, but we get clients that have a different set of needs, support needs from a DEIB perspective, just strictly based upon where they are within the broad continuum of DEI work.
Yes. I mean, it's such important work. So what brings you to this work? How'd you get here?
A really interesting story. So I say this work found me because my background is not directly into this space. My background is more so in the space of marketing communications. And so I worked in that industry for a long period of time. And while in that industry, I remember I was working at an ad agency that was relatively large inside, the largest in South Carolina at the time. And it was about maybe a 400 plus size organization. And while we were headquartered, or the organization was headquartered in Greenville, South Carolina, which is where I'm based, they also had a presence in New York. And so when I would go back and forth between the Greenville and the New York office, I would often be envious of how strong in diversity the New York office was. But little be known to me, the New York office was also struggling by way of diversifying its workforce. It just so happens that they had a better makeup of representation across different dimensions of diversity, strictly because it was in a large city like New York, right? And so, but I thought that that was a really important point that I couldn't let go, because what I know is that if you are a marketing professional, then part of your job is to be a smart marketing partner to your clients whose consumer constituencies represent not only just diverse America, but global diversity. And so I saw that as a missed opportunity on our part in Greenville, South Carolina, because we weren't being intentional about it. So long story short, I love the space. I love the industry and the work. It was always on time, on budget, on strategy. And I felt I was going to be in that space for the long haul, but I wanted to do it in a way where I was really satisfying the desire of connecting on equity and inclusion and belonging to the work to reach broad audiences. And so I went to the president CEO, who was very hands-on at the time. I had a good rapport with him. And I shared this story of, why aren't there others who look like me that's doing this work within our organization? And the BHAG, or the big, hairy, audacious goal for the agency at the time, was to become the most admired agency. So I said, why are we waiting for someone to place mandates for us to begin doing this? We need to do it now, and here's why. And he listened very intently, asked some very thoughtful questions, and then proceeded to say, you're right, Nika, we're going to do it. You're going to lead it. Now tell us how. And so I was prepared for everything in that conversation with the exception of tell us how. But Robin, I did have some really smart and astute people in my circle who were already very well respected in the space of DEI. And I literally just immersed myself and became kind of a student of the work. And then it led to other opportunities for me to do this work. And within other organizations, then I caught the entrepreneur bug. So that's my story. So that's why I say it found me. I didn't find it. But honestly, when I talk about that and answer that question, because I receive that question a lot, when I take inventory of my life and all of the things that I have connected myself with, I find that really I have always been connected and drawn to leaving no one behind, right? I just didn't really know how I could allow that to manifest itself into my vocation. So, but anyway, now I'm blessed to be able to do this every single day. And it's impactful work. It's work that I feel like I am called for, I'm purposed for.
Yeah, it's important work. Absolutely. Is there anything that you mentioned, you always you felt a connection to this, leaving no one behind. Is there something in your life or your early life that you remember that is a specific connection to this that you can kind of see, oh, this experience was one of the things?
Absolutely. I can point to so many different examples, but I know that this is a podcast. And so I certainly want to make sure that I express for those who are listening, I am a Black woman. And I have, as I mentioned before, 2 kids. I am a mom of a neurodivergent son. I am a mom of a strong activist daughter. And, as a Black woman that has had to navigate the world, even entrepreneurship and the challenges there, and just show up in spaces where often I am the only person that looks like me, sometimes the only woman. I have been keenly aware of the disadvantages that can present themselves. And I felt that deeply. And so I think that's why I'm so attached to this idea of leaving no one behind, helping to create opportunities and spaces where people can show up at their best and be given full opportunity for success. And so, those are part of my whys.
Yeah, I could see and I can hear the passion in your voice as you're talking about it. All right, so let's talk about your book for a minute. Inclusion Uncomplicated. And as I mentioned in the introduction already, stop there and you got my intention.
Good.
Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI. And that was published by Forbes Books. Tell us the premise of the book.
So the premise of the book, and this is book number 3, not to express that it is a series of any type, but it does build upon my other 2 books as well. But when I think about book number 3, it really was to help underscore the fact that there are a lot of people who care deeply about this work of DEIB, and they want to see it manifested in all the spaces that they may dwell or show up in. But they are on the fence about how to show up to support the work and to accept ownership and accountability for it, because they see it as either being very daunting and complicated and the work that's others are responsible for. And I did not want that to be the barrier. And so when I was writing this book, I was very clear on who the audience is not. But then I had to spend time thinking about who the audience is. And so for me, when I think about who this book is not for, it's not for those individuals who have dug their heels into the sand and they have this strong opinion that there is a dominant culture or race, and that we don't need to have conversations where we're trying to undo the oppressive nature of our society and to create equitable spaces where everyone can thrive and have a sense of belonging. I think that it is hard to persuade those that are at that place. And so I'm not talking to them. But I truly believe that there is a large population of people that are quite passive only because they don't see this as part of their responsibility. And again, as I mentioned, because it feels so daunting. So I wanted to uncomplicate inclusion so that people can feel like I can engage and I don't have to be afraid of it or intimidated. There are things that I can do within my sphere of influence that helps me to further this work in a way that's impactful. And through that, allow the modeling of those behaviors to then be something that others will catch on to. And so that is what Inclusion Uncomplicated is all about. I see this as a tool for people to not just read it from, cover to cover, then place it on the shelf, but to keep it on their desk, to earmark the pages, to write in the book. There's critical reflections at the end of each chapter to help people to sit with, what have I just exposed myself to? How do I feel about it? What do I need to do about it within, the work and the places and spaces in which I show up? And so it is a practical guide to help people to transform themselves and their lives to be a much more intentional around, again, just creating these spaces of inclusion, equity, and belonging for all.
Yes. And you mentioned this book is the third, not necessarily a series, but it kind of follows on the others. Tell us the titles of the other two.
Sure. So book number 1 is Inclusion Uncomplicated. No, I'm sorry. That's book number 3. You can tell what my brain is. That's the book released at the end of January. So all conversations have been about Inclusion Uncomplicated. Book number 1 is The Intentional Inclusionist. And often that's part of my branding. People know me as the Intentional Inclusionist. But it's all about growing yourself for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Leadership. And then book number 2, which followed that maybe about a year or two later, is called Next Level Inclusionist. And so again, it's just a way to set some foundation, have people to consider both the personal path as well as the responsibility of taking all of the intel and the skill sets and applying it to maybe the work environments they could find themselves in. And then just doing our part, one person at a time, to help further this work.
Yes. And so because you have 3 books, now let's talk about this author part of you. The guest I spoke to earlier, my last guest, she said, I wrote a book, but I don't see myself as an author. Do you consider yourself to be an author?
I consider myself to be an author. I have to say, after book number 1, Robin, I consider myself an author even after book number 1, but I will tell you that book number 3 was a vastly different experience. So book number 1 was a hybrid publishing approach. Book number 2 was self-published. Book number 3, Inclusion Uncomplicated, was in partnership with Forbes Books. And it was a daunting exercise. It was a year-plus long exercise. And I was at a different place in my career and even in my, mindset around this work. This body of work has evolved a lot. I had learned a lot. I had experienced a lot in society had happened that really helped shape how in which a lot of people think about the work of equity and inclusion, and really trying to address the oppression and systemic racism that continues to show forth. And so there was a lot that I wanted to say and I needed to say. So my confidence level was built up from book number 1, number 2. I even look back today and I'll read certain portions of book 1 and 2, and even portions of the most recent Inclusion Uncomplicated, and I'll say, I wish I had said that differently. And I think that's a part of the process for all authors. But generally speaking, when you go through that process, I have no idea what process the person that actually shared that commentary with you about not feeling like an author, but when you go through that process, the way that it is intended, where you really are being the voice of magnifying and amplifying the premise of the book and selling the book and promoting the book, writing the book, having the book be edited, doing the audio recording. For me, I did my voice when I recorded the audio book for Inclusion Uncomplicated. But all of those experiences together, how can you not walk away feeling like an author and solely responsible for this gift to the world? And I say gift, but it can be a hard process once you have completed the book and it's time for it to release. For me, it was a really interesting dynamic that I experienced when it was time for the book to release. On the day of launch, I literally called up one of my girlfriends in my mastermind brain trust group, who was also an author. And I said, what's happening here? So I don't know what this is coming up for me, but I should be like celebrating and out and like really talking about my book. I said, but I want to fall up into a corner and just hide. And I think it was because I birthed something, right? And I didn't feel as intensity about the birthing process of the book with book number 1 and number 2 as I did with number 3. Maybe it could be the alignment with my publisher, Forbes. It's a big brand name, I don't know, but it felt different this time. And she assured me that those are some normal experiences. And, if you think about birthing anything, we want people to love it. We want people to understand it. We want people to just embrace it. And so when you question, is that imposter syndrome? Or I like to say it's really a misdiagnosis because I don't believe in imposter syndrome. But yeah, the notions of it certainly can creep up and cause us to second guess ourselves. And so that was my experience until after having that conversation with her. And I knew that I wasn't alone and that it was, again, just my mind playing tricks on me. But yes, I had something to offer and it was going to be impactful. And I am now glad to say that I no longer have those thoughts and feelings.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm imagining Many women who have written books have that experience, and it's good
I've
to
heard
hear that
that.
you're not alone because
Yeah,
it is when
absolutely.
you're taking a piece of your heart, your words represent who you are,
Yeah,
and just kind of being
yeah.
a deep space within that you're now putting out in the public.
So true.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what also helped me. I remember in the writing process, I had a mentor, someone highly respected that was in my network, and she said to me when I was questioning, is this book really going to make a difference? Is it different? I feel like I'm saying things that have already been said, and she said, maybe so, but people haven't heard it from you. And I was released of any type of thoughts that this would not be a good use of my time. And so I want to encourage your listeners, because perhaps some people have a book in mind or maybe some other kind of endeavor, and they're thinking, well, it's been done before. Maybe so, but has it been done by you the way that you see it as being done? And that was important for me.
Yeah, I resonate with that. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned part of it had to do possibly with the partnership with Forbes Books. Tell us how
Yeah.
that happened.
It's so interesting. I mean, I, like many people, obviously at the time in which I was approached by Forbes, was really familiar with the Forbes brand. I had, followed a lot of the articles, and I mean, the Forbes brand is the Forbes brand. And so I was not looking to write book number 3 at that time, but representatives from Forbes reached out, and apparently they had been, following my work and expressed interest in partnering. And, after maybe a couple conversations, I thought, well, maybe I should consider this. I do have, plans for book number 3. It just wasn't right in that season. So anyway, the stars aligned, and it was a great partnership. I really appreciated the way in which, Forbes Books really allowed me to center my voice. I didn't feel stifled. I didn't feel confined. I felt that they were equally concerned about my voice showing forth in a way that felt good to me, because that was really important. The process in terms of the support from A to Z was remarkable. And I think that it gave me a great launching off point to feel confident that the book was going to do well. And again, I'm only like maybe 4 months in now since the release date, but just by early signs, it certainly has met my expectation, exceeded my expectations as well as theirs. And so look forward to seeing what's in the future.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Congratulations on that. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. The podcast is for what I call high achieving women, responsible in their personal lives, professional lives. People come to them for support, and I'm like, who supports them? And now they add to it, they've written a book. And so from your vast experience as a human being and your professional experience, either or, what's something you'd say to the woman I just described as a form of support?
I think that I draw on the words of, as I just shared, that my mentor shared with me once before, we're going to question ourselves. I think that's the nature of humans. It's also very much the nature of women, especially when we are quite ambitious and we're driven. We really want to make sure that we are making our mark in the world. And so I think that whatever we put our hands to, our minds to, let's be confident in our abilities to show up well. And I think that level of confidence really helps the output of the product to also be at a certain level. I'm a believer in having in community. So having kind of a tribe of sisters and other women that, you can trust to be a sounding board and a thought partner with. And so I think that helps us as well. So don't, demise community, the sense of community. I also believe that we have to give ourselves permission to lean into the importance of progress over perfection. Because sometimes we can be clouded by trying to do everything well all the time. And that's not to say that can't be within reach, but it goes back to a lot of the conversations I find myself a part of, where women really question how to find that right balance, right? And I don't really like the word balance, because I believe that everything in life worth having is going to, at some point in time or another, create an imbalance. I rather like to talk about it as work-life integration or blend. And I think that that helps us to be in the right mindset where we don't disappoint ourselves unnecessarily because we're trying to create something that really just doesn't exist, right? And so, give ourselves, extend grace to ourselves the same way that there's need to extend grace to others and enjoy the process. Yeah.
Yeah, such valuable words. Okay, so now the podcast is Leadership Purpose. Do you think it's important for you and or for others to have purpose in their work, or at least a sense of purpose in their work?
I do. Now, do I know of a number of people that do their work incredibly well? They're skilled for it. They have the right mindset for it. All the credentials and the accolades that allows them to do the work well. Yes. But where I find that oftentimes there is a disconnect is in the lack of the likability of the work that they're doing. So the passion in the work that they're doing. And I believe that it takes both will and skill in order for people to really optimize what they can bring to any type of leadership space, right? And so even for me, there's a lot of people, especially after the summer of George Floyd's murder, when it seems like overnight you had all of these people that were becoming DEI experts and practitioners overnight because they were seeing it as an opportunity. And I don't place any judgment there, but it's more than just about the passion. It's also being able to align, again, that passion, that will with skill. And just because someone is part of a marginalized community does not necessarily mean that they're poised to be able to do the work of DEI. And so I'm just really big on amplifying that message because I think that whatever we do, if we are purposed to do it, then to me, that is communicating that there's both will and skill aligned. And I think the two together is what optimizes our abilities.
Will and skill.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it seems like you have both. You have
Well,
both.
thank you. I received that from you, Robin. Thank you so much.
Nika, you've been so generous with your time, and I know you've already had such a full day. But before you go and tell people how they can be in touch with you, is there anything you'd like to share that maybe I forgot to ask or didn't think to ask, or something that's on your mind or heart that you'd like to leave our conversation with?
Well, I am so grateful for the opportunity again to Robin share with your podcast community. There are a couple things that I think would be useful to your audience, especially those that may find themselves wanting to connect with ways and opportunities to strengthen their knowledge and support of DEIB. And that is, I offer a vodcast, and we extract the audio and make it available in a podcast capacity, but it's called Intentional Conversations. And we do this every Friday from 11 to 12 Eastern Standard Time. And we invite in a guest co-host that is a practitioner in this space. And we just dissect and intersect conversations of diversity, equity, and inclusion with business and leadership. And they always are very educational. I learn every single week. And it's free for anyone who would like to partake and be a part. And so it's kind of our way at my firm, Nika White Consulting, NWC for short, of showing up for the broader community who are looking for ways to strengthen their knowledge and their understanding. And so I just want people to know about it, and they can sign up and register. Again, it's free. It's every week. You can catch all the replays from the past, 2 or 3 years. No, actually 3+ years that we've been doing this, by just simply going to the website, which is nikawhite.com.
Okay. All right. Well, that sounds like a valuable resource. And I really appreciate you and the work you're doing. And thank you for taking time out of which like I mentioned before, I know it's a huge full day for you. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. So, and everyone, I'm so glad you're here. And if you're interested in getting in touch with me, you want to contact me on social media, you can find me at Robin L. Owens, PhD, Robin L. Owens, PhD. And I primarily hang out on LinkedIn, but I'm on all the socials. And if you're an author or someone you consider yourself not an author, but you wrote a book and you've been thinking about expanding your book into a course, I have a free training that will help you get started. So just head on over to createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com. And that's my opportunity to blend my passion for teaching and purpose and business all in one place. All right. And until next time, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.